Na 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 na. Hey YouTube, my name is Vin. I like to play games, and welcome back to another episode of Vin Plays Yahoo Fantasy Football. This is my Week 15 recap show where I go over how my team did, my general thoughts on any of the games I watched, and who I'm targeting on the waiver wire for the week. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Again, congratulations to anybody who's made it this far, who's made it to the championship game. Uh, as you can see, we barely squeezed out a victory against Blue Balls here, 125 to 113. Man, I'm so lucky. I'm so glad that I was able to get that number one seed. Because if you take a peek below at the other bracket, the lower bracket down there between the drafted and Von like Donkey Kong, if we were up against the drafted, our fantasy season would be over this week. So if we ended up staying at that number two seed, man, it'd be all over for us. But yeah, we ended up squeezing out the victory against Blue Balls. Neither of our teams performed particularly well, both well under expectations and under projections. So let's go ahead and jump over to our matchup for last week. Well, this week, week 15. Yeah, you know what? Things were really close, and like I said earlier during my starter video for this week, I thought things could be or would be pretty close just because of how good all the matchups for Blue Balls was. All his players are playing against good matchups, and I really thought this week was going to be close. I was really worried, but I really thought that it would be close because both of our teams would perform really well. I never considered that it'd be close because of how bad and how sucky my team would be. Number one, my team would be, but number two, how sucky Blue Balls team would perform as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and jump into our matchup. We both pretty much laid turds this week, so I just happened to lay the smaller turd than Blue Balls. Going into our quarterback position, again starting with Aaron Rodgers, you know what? This was his lowest output since that Week 6 game against Tampa Bay. And you know what? This was a kind of strange game. Actually, you know what? There was a lot of strange... This was a strange week. There was a lot of strange games this week. This game with Green Bay versus the Carolina Panthers, this game was a lot more competitive than anybody really thought it would be. At least the analysts and the news that I was watching and reading about this game. The Panthers defense really came out to play. They were really harassing Aaron Rodgers. They were beating the Green Bay offensive line. I wouldn't say routinely, but they were really harassing Aaron Rodgers. He had, I believe, 3 or 4 sacks during this game, and it really affected his play. And yeah, he just didn't throw as many touchdowns as he typically does. And you know, at 20 points, that's pretty much his floor for the year. It just sucks that he did it during your fantasy playoffs. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people who are relying on his production lost their week because he typically has been putting up like 25, 30 points, 30 plus points. So especially against this matchup against Carolina, we really thought he would perform above expectations, or at least to where he's been performing lately. But no, he kind of dropped the ball. I think this is... I wouldn't say that he dropped the ball. This was kind of a down game for the Packers in general. I really expect them to bounce back against Tennessee for this coming week 16. But anyways, let's go ahead and look to the other side at our opponent's start. He started Philip Rivers. Philip Rivers pretty much put up what Philip Rivers has been putting up for the last few weeks. 20 points is basically, yeah, for the last 4 weeks, good matchups. Houston's a cherry matchup for quarterbacks. And Philip Rivers, he didn't disappoint here. He pretty much got his projections. And as somebody who's streaming quarterbacks, that's more or less all you can expect for Philip Rivers. So not a blow up performance, but you know, very adequate. And if I was streaming, I would totally take that. Going down to our wide receiver core, man, Davante Adams, yeah, just like Aaron Rodgers, this is his lowest output for the year when he hasn't got hurt. As you can see up there, game 2 versus Detroit, that game he ended up hurting his I forget what it was. Was it his hamstring or his ankle? I don't recall. But back in week 2, he ended up hurting himself. That's why he got those 5 points. But this week, yeah, it was just another strange game. The Carolina Panthers defense really performed. But also game script wise, Aaron Jones was really effective and he was having a super good game. So they were able to rely on Aaron Jones to get them their yards and move the chains, so to speak. So they didn't really need to throw as much since they were able to rely on Aaron Jones. But yeah, Davante Adams, we've come to expect 15 points, at least 15 points every game for Davante Adams, and for him to have this really pedestrian kind of performance, yeah, that really it's really kind of shocking actually. But knock on wood, I really believe that they have a bounce back. They'll have a bounce back performance next week. Aaron Rodgers, Davante Adams, and the Green Bay Packers, I expect them to perform well next week against Tennessee. Tennessee really doesn't have good defense, so yeah, hopefully, knock on wood again, we don't jinx ourselves, but hopefully next week they could have a good game for us during the championship week. But going down the list, we have Allen Robinson, who also underperformed. He had a really cherry matchup against Jacksonville here. From what I'm reading about this game, though, David Montgomery dominated this game. We'll talk about him a little bit since our opponent did start David Montgomery. But since they were able to rely on Montgomery, they really didn't need to throw as much during this game. Yeah, Allen Robinson really didn't perform super well during a cherry matchup. He even got fewer targets. He had 4 reception, 5 targets. That's well below his around 9 target average for the year. But looking forward, he will be playing, or not Jacksonville, Minnesota. Sorry, during week 15 he was playing Minnesota, and that is a cherry matchup. But he does have another cherry matchup against Jacksonville here too. So we probably will be starting him next week. Knock on wood again that he does have a bounce back performance. But I suppose we'll see. Let's go ahead and look over to the other side. Now this was a strange game. My opponent started Juju Smith-Schuster, and they played Cincinnati, which should have been a super smash spot. As I talked about during the last game, I really thought that the Steelers and pretty much everybody else, everybody who's been keeping an eye out on football anyways, really believed that the Steelers were just going to dominate this game and just shut down Cincinnati. Cincinnati has been bad for pretty much ever since Joe Burrow went down. Cincinnati has been pretty awful, and their defense has been god awful. But for whatever reasons, the announcers yesterday, they did make note of this and referred to this several times throughout the game. Apparently, Juju Smith-Schuster was TikToking some pretty disrespectful kind of videos, like TikToks of him dancing on the Cincinnati logo during pregame warm-ups. So the announcers last night, they were taking note, and they were talking about how that really could, really could have anyways, fire up the Cincinnati team. And that really seemed to light a fire under those Cincinnati players, because yeah, against Juju, it really looked like they were trying to clamp down on Juju. And just throughout the entire game, the Cincinnati defense pretty much shut down the Steelers offense. Not that the Steelers offense has been playing well lately. The Steelers the Steelers run game has been pretty non-existent with James Conner banged up. And he didn't play this game either, so they were relying on Benny Snell and their rookie running back McFarland. But they shut down Juju Smith-Schuster. Good for us that they shut down Juju Smith-Schuster. But this was another really odd game. Most analysts and even Vegas, the odds were really against Cincinnati. And Cincinnati, not only did they pull out the victory, but they pulled out a convincing victory against the Steelers. Going down the list, Mike Evans, he did not disappoint during this game. Let's see his points. 14 points. Atlanta is the best. I want to say they are either the best or one of the top 3 best matchups for wide receivers. They're pretty decent. they've come to be pretty decent against the run as the year has gone by, but against wide receivers, you know, their secondary is pretty awful, and Mike Evans took advantage here. Just glad for us, good for us that he didn't go like nuclear, he didn't go Super Saiyan on us, and he kept it to just a really respectable and a really above average performance at 14 points. Going to our running back core, Nick Chubb, here's another one. Nick Chubb, you know, we really thought that he'd have a really good game against the Giants here, but the Giants defense, they showed to be pretty good. They were shutting down the run like fairly, I wouldn't say fairly regularly, but they were pretty stout up front. And Nick Chubb just, yeah, he didn't score nearly as much as he normally does. You know, like I said earlier during my last video, he's had 100 yards, well, total yards each and every game ever since he's come back from injury, which would be what week is that? Week 10. So for the last 5 games rather, for the last 5 games, he's totaled at least 100 yards. This week he did not total 100 yards, 50 yards on the ground and 16 yards through the air. And you know what? If he didn't score a touchdown, he would have he would have had a really bad game. And you know what? Knock on wood that this doesn't continue. He does have New Jersey. I keep saying New Jersey. But he does have the Jets next week, and that was another crazy game. I'll talk about it a little bit more as we go down the line and talk about Robert Woods. But yeah, the New York Jets, they look like they they looked really good this week. So I'm kind of concerned about how well Nick Chubb might perform next week against the Jets. We'll see about that. I can't imagine. Well, there's no way that I could sit him for the upcoming week, so we just have to kind of temper our expectations when it comes to his start for next week. Coming up next, Josh Jacobs. Oh, thank goodness. Josh Jacobs did have a pretty good game against the Chargers. During this game, this was a Thursday night game, Derek Carr did end up hurting himself super early during this game, and it really made me kind of freak out. Without Derek Carr, I really didn't know whether Marcus Mariota, who is the backup quarterback for the Raiders, I didn't know if he could get it done. But yeah, he totally got it done during this game. Mariota looked great coming in. He sustained Josh Jacobs. He was throwing great passes to Nelson Aguilar. Nelson Aguilar also had a pretty good game. Darren Waller had a super good game. We'll get to him in a minute. But coming back to Josh Jacobs, yeah, Josh Jacobs with almost 19 points, 26 rush attempts, 76 yards, and a touchdown. He also caught some passes as well. Three receptions on all 3 targets and 38 receiving yards. You know what? On the ground, he wasn't the most efficient, and he is still dealing with nagging injuries. So Josh Jacobs, considering the injuries that he's been dealing with and that pretty much derailed him last game against Indiana. You know, at 18, almost 19 points, that's all we could ask for and hope for with Josh Jacobs. He does have a bit of a tougher matchup against Miami, whose defense is pretty solid. But again, you know, I don't think that I could sit Josh Jacobs. So we're just going to have to temper our expectations for next week. But for this week, yeah, Josh Jacobs, he really came through for us. One of the few who came through for us actually this week. But going over to our opponent's running back core, he had a stack of Derrick Henry and David Montgomery. Derrick Henry, actually, you know what? It's it's really crazy to say, but I really expected him to have a lot higher or a lot more points. This performance for him, especially against Detroit, whose run defense has been awful this year, I really thought, you know, 24 points, I'll take it. You know, I really thought that he'd have 30 plus points, and that possibility was really high. But Tannehill ended up taking over this game. He ended up running in, I believe, 2 touchdowns and throwing 3 touchdown passes, that is. So that really tempered Derrick Henry's performance here. Derrick Henry did end up getting, I believe, around 150 yards. Yeah, it looks like 150 rushing yards here, only 1 touchdown, and 24 rush attempts. Yeah, Derrick Henry is a beast, and he has an equally good matchup this week against Green Bay. But we survived Derrick Henry this week. Thankful that we don't have to face him next week against the Packers, whose defense, whose rush defense is really awful. I really wish that they would have addressed that over the offseason with their draft picks, but I guess it is what it is. Who did surprise, though, was David Montgomery. Well, I guess he didn't super surprise, but he had a super good game, almost 30 points himself against Minnesota. Minnesota's defense, again, this year hasn't been all that great this year, so not a huge surprise there, but he did 32 rush attempts, 146 yards. Yeah, 32 rush attempts. Again, that is freaking crazy. And that's another reason why Allen Robinson really didn't perform all that well. If you're giving your running back 32 touches, 32 attempts, man, that's really going to suck up all the offensive chances for the rest of the team right there. But yeah, David Montgomery, 146 yards, 2 touchdowns, and didn't really do too much through the air. 1 reception on 16 yards. We survived the Derrick Henry, David Montgomery stack here, which I bet this stack here. I bet people who had both of these guys are going to a lot of championship games in a lot of leagues. Thankful that we were able to overcome them. But going over to our tight end position, Darren Waller. Oh my goodness, Darren Waller is a freaking beast. I believe he had a couple of touchdowns, a ton of yardage, 150 yards, 1 touchdown, I'm sorry. 12 targets and 9 receptions. Again, against Miami's defense this coming week is going to be a bit tougher. But I kind of have faith in Mariota, knock on wood that I'm not jinxing myself. But Mariota did look good during the last game. Again, Miami's defense is pretty tough. But I think Mariota is good enough to sustain Darren Waller, is good enough to sustain Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs and keep them in the game and hopefully keep them competitive. Because if the game script is positive for them, then it'll mean good things for both Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs. Going over to my opponent's tight end, this was another one of those things. Eric Ebron, during his first target, he was targeted once, and during that pass, he was hit super hard by 3 Cincinnati defenders last night. And that basically ended his night. He was hurt for the rest of the game. I remember reading news that said that there was no organ damage. He suffered no organ damage. It was pretty much like a chest or an abdominal injury. So glad to hear that he isn't seriously hurt anyways. But it looked like, he got wiped out during that game. After he got hurt and he got carted off, it was pretty clear that he wasn't going to be coming back for the rest of this game, for this game anyways, last game last night. It really benefited us that he did not score. He did not score any points. He donated this week, but those are the breaks though. If you get hurt early, then you're not going to put up many points. Going to our flex, this was another crazy game. This is what I'm talking about, how crazy this week was. New Jersey. The Jets, the New York Jets, they beat the Los Angeles Rams this week, which is crazy. The Jets have been so bad this year. And not only that, they jeopardized their chance at, at least right now, for now anyways, they jeopardized their chance at the number 1 pick next year for Trevor Lawrence, the really highly touted quarterback. So the Jets won. They beat the Rams, which is crazy. Robert Woods was pretty much the only player that performed during this game from the things that I've read anyways. I didn't actually get a chance to watch this game, but Robert Woods, Mr. Reliable himself, getting it done in a bunch of different ways. He had rush attempt for 40 yards, as you can see down there. 8 targets, 6 receptions, 56 yards, and a touchdown. Mr. Reliable, Robert Woods. He does have a good matchup against Seattle next week. Although, again, my expectations are a little bit tempered because Seattle's defense has been looking better over the last few weeks. Their offense hasn't been looking great, but their defense has been picking it back up. So, it might be a little bit of a red herring that Seattle is listed as green and the second best matchup there. I think that's mostly stemming from the first half of their season where their defense was pretty much like a sieve, and defender or offensive players were just running right through them. But they have been picking it up lately, so I'm a little bit concerned about his matchup for next week. But let's go ahead and look on the other side. Nyheim Hines, Nyheim Hines against Houston. This was a good matchup, but they have been relying on Jonathan Taylor for the last couple of weeks, and they seem to have made the switch. And it really looks like that, this is just part and parcel about that switch. Jonathan Taylor tearing it up, while Nyheim Hines getting basically the scraps, the leftovers here. So he only had 5 rush attempts, 43 yards, but he mostly gets his points through the air, which he didn't really get too many yards through the air. 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 11 yards. Yeah, good for us, that he didn't have a blow-up game because, his ceiling could be, multiple touchdowns. So it could be around 20 points, and we dodged that bullet right there. Younghoe Koo, man, yeah. Our kicker, Younghoe Koo, beating expectations again, beating predictions, 9 points against a really tough Tampa Bay defense. Younghoe, he's going to have another tough matchup next week against Kansas City, but the Falcons, they can move the ball. Julio might be back for that game. And even if Julio isn't back, Matt Ryan really looks like he's starting to figure things out with that offense, with playing without Julio. Calvin Ridley had a really good game. So, and not only that, but as far as streaming Matt Ryan, if anybody out there is thinking about streaming Matt Ryan, their run game, that is, their running backs have been god awful. And there has even been news that they made the switch from Todd Gurley to Ito Smith as their starter or as their main running back. So as far as Matt Ryan is concerned, he's going to be throwing a lot. They are not going to be relying on their run game. They're going to be throwing even more than they were throwing before. So if anybody's looking to stream Matt Ryan, that's not a bad stream here, despite the matchup against Kansas City is pretty tough. But, going on to our defense, the Rams super disappointed here. I really thought that the Rams would totally smash the Jets. Yeah, but the Jets came to play, man. They were shutting down the Rams. They were scoring against the Rams, 23-20, I believe the final score was. Yeah, we can see it right there. It was the final score. The Rams just couldn't get it done this week. For whatever reason, and we'll probably be dropping the Rams and picking up some other guys on the waiver wire, just because Seattle's offense again hasn't been looking all that great, but the potential with Russell Wilson, that high ceiling for that offense, they could totally destroy defenses if they get in rhythm and get back to what they were doing earlier this year. Going over to the other side, Justin Tucker, that was a smash mashup against Jacksonville. Good thing, he didn't make his expectations, his projected points, that is. But, 8 points, that's very respectable. Good on him on there. And then the Baltimore defense did pretty well, like they were expected to do. 10 points against Jacksonville. That could have been a lot worse, considering how bad Jacksonville has been this year. 10 points We're glad they didn't have more. But anyways, just looking at the score, 125-113. What really sealed it for us was that stack of those 2 players on the Steelers. They really underperformed this week. Well, the Bengals really overperformed. That performance from the Bengals was really out of nowhere. Nobody knew that they could play that way, number one, or they would play that way. But you know what? If it was brought on by Juju Smith-Schuster, if it was brought on by his disrespectful TikTok dancing over the Bengals logo during pregame, that's on Juju right there. So I guess it's karma that he had a bad game last night. or that they really came out to stop him last night and the Steelers. Moving forward, let's go ahead and check on who I'm looking to pick up on the waiver wire. Right now, most of my waiver wire claims are going to be to more or less block my opponent for this week. I am going to be playing Von like Donkey Kong in the Fantasy Champions in the Fantasy Championship, I should say, this week. So the Philadelphia defense, they will be playing the Dallas Cowboys. So that is a pretty smash matchup right there. Although, you know, I am already rostering a lot of defenses here. Right now, I have 3 defenses in Cleveland who I plan to start. Although, you know, I might need to reconsider that since the Jets have been looking good. And since they won a game, you know, it's like, it's totally unpredictable now what they're going to do. Are they going to play hard next week? You know, are they going to totally just disqualify themselves from the top draft pick? Because right now it looks like Jacksonville does have the number 1 draft pick. They do have the tie break, or as it were, the anti-tie break. They do have a worse record technically than the Jets. So right now it looks like Jacksonville is in front of the line to get that number 1 pick. But you know, the Jets can seal the deal and totally lose that pick by winning again against Cleveland. So or at least playing hard against Cleveland. So yeah, we might have to rethink that. We do have a secondary defense in Chicago who is playing Jacksonville, who again has been playing pretty bad. And you know, Chicago's defense has been playing really well, and they do have a good defense. So we'll have to consider starting them, whether or not we want to start them or Cleveland for this week. But again, you know, to play defense, I'm considering picking up the Philadelphia Eagles against Dallas. I think they could perform really well there. Giovanni Bernard, he had a really good game last week against the Steelers yesterday, that is, and he does have a really good matchup this week. I forget who he's playing, but he would be a decent starter if Von like Donkey Kong wanted to pick him up, because Von like Donkey Kong's his secondary running backs aren't the greatest. I believe he has David Johnson, who he himself does have a good matchup, and I forget who he'd have on his flex. But Jalen Hurts is the third guy that I have on my waiver wire to pick up. I might just pick him up just because of how well he's been playing. I don't see myself sitting Aaron Rodgers, but you know, just in case something happens, you know, knock on wood that it doesn't. I thought, you know, if we couldn't pick up those 2 other guys, or those 2 other players, essentially, basically Giovanni Bernard or the Philadelphia defense, we could easily just pick up Jalen Hurts. My opponent will not be needing Jalen Hurts because my opponent has Patrick Mahomes. He has a stack of Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, which is very scary in and of itself. And they do have a super good matchup too, but I'll save that for our starter show later this week. And with that being said, I believe that pretty much covers everything that we need to cover during this episode. Thanks again so much for watching another episode of Vin Plays Yahoo Fantasy Football. My name is Vin. I like to play games, and I'll see you next time.